Welcome and greetings to everyone tuning in and listening around the globe. I'm Eric, she's Donna, and we are the Real Siblings. Thanks for joining us today for this podcast that is a bit far out, freakish, fresh, and quite simply far from ordinary. We are both professional real estate agents with Keller Williams, working in the southwest states of Arizona and Texas. Right now, I'm sure you're thinking, why all the F words? Frankly, we will explain that in due course. This podcast blends lifestyle together with real estate as we work to inform, enlighten, fasten, and enthrall our listeners. While the topics vary and our conversations always go in many directions, we strive to provide our listeners with insights into our industry, better equipping them for their next real estate transaction. Now, we invite you to relax and allow us to edutain you for the next few minutes.
Oh, Eric.
That's
So, friends, Eric told me he wrote a new introduction and he didn't share it with me. But during the past year or so, we've talked about a book that I've been working on, and it is called F Words. And I know, right? And I am now at the kind of editing first edit from someone locally, and then getting ready to do the next couple of edits. So Eric suggested that maybe we talk about a couple of the words that are going to be in the book, and then, because this is our job, relate them to real estate, because that's why you're here, right? So what we decided this morning is I'm going to take a couple of the words, and Eric's going to take a couple of the words, and we're going to talk about them. And the first one that I'm going to share this morning is the word familiar, and then also in conjunction with that, familiarity. And I'm going to read just a small piece of it, and then we'll share a little bit about what that means to us from the real estate perspective. So it starts: as a huge Billy Joel fan, I can't believe I didn't think to write about this word sooner. In his song, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, they talk of their old familiar place, you and I face to face. If there isn't already something going through your head related to a familiar place in your life, then I'm going to say that's kind of unusual, because most of us have that. A few years ago, I made a summer road trip and I drove across the United States, about 5,200 miles. I also spent time just before Christmas in Chicago. As part of that road trip, I drove through southern Illinois, where my maternal grandmother had lived. I drove into Ohio through my little hometown, and I immediately slowed down to look closely at each home. I stopped to talk to people along the way, those friends who still live where they lived when I moved away nearly 25 years ago. I took pictures of the cornfields. Yep, yes, I did. I inhaled the smell of freshly mowed grass. I walked the trail in the park where I played as a child and my kids played as little ones 20 some years later. I had coffee with the kids, in air quotes, that I went to high school with. I stayed in the welcoming home of dear friends of my parents in a bedroom that I have used many times over the past 20 years. I walked to the cemetery and I talked to my parents. It was all familiar. It was all comfortable. It all felt good, and it made me smile. So that's
and
a
right now, reading it, it's bringing you to tears.
it brings me, boy, you can hear it in my voice, can't you, Eric? Yeah. There is something about the familiar that just evokes this emotion. And it could be a place, it could be a voice, it could be a smell, it could be so many things. So, as part of this podcast, we have talked a lot about what's familiar to us from our childhood. And, they may or may not be the same memories, because what he remembers and what I remember aren't
I've
necessarily.
got him right, and she misremembers more frequently.
Oh, there you go, because I'm older, right?
That's it.
Things are slipping away.
You know it.
But it also, I laugh when I think about it related to where I live in town, and the fact that I get in my car and I drive from my office to my home. And I barely pay attention to where I'm turning as if the car knows where it's supposed to go, right? and and then heaven forbid I was supposed to stop and do an errand because that wasn't part of the familiar.
Oh yeah, that's the part that for me, doing that thing, it's like I know I got to go do this, but because you're on autopilot, you're going the familiar what you're used to doing. As
Yeah,
I get down off of our hillside, and if
yeah,
I need to go pick up a package at the post office, which Amazon hasn't delivered, which is an entirely different episode since I paid for delivery to my house, and I turn the wrong direction, it's like, oh geez,
that's
because I've just pulled out onto a rural highway that's 65 miles an hour.
with the
Now I'm
hill.
going the direction I don't want to go, and where am I going to turn around to go back to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish?
So did you
Because
go all the way, do you go all the way down to that turn where you would have turned to go to your old church and you go to an intersection, or is there a place where you can
no, in this case, I had headed into Helotes
Oh,
and
okay.
I needed to go to the post office. So I needed to find some place to turn around and head back out to.
Towards Bandera or
But
yeah.
yeah, there's times where you just, I use the term autopilot, but
Mhm.
you are so familiar with it. But that's also why I think statistically, more accidents happen within 4 miles of your
Yes.
home than they do anyplace else because you are on more alert and more attentive when you're in some place that is less familiar.
Yeah.
You have a comfort that, oh, I'm just a mile from home now. I don't need to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look what happens.
And that can be a very scary thing if you're a visual person, especially. Like I can picture when I go to your house, I can picture kind of the turn, and I know that there's a big store over here and there's a restaurant that I often get a coffee at before I leave to come home. And then as I go to your house, I'm like, I look for the railing and the little, it's all visual to me. It isn't a GPS helping me get there. And then if I miss it or it's dark, I'm screwed. 'Cause I don't-
Because there ain't a whole lot of lights to help light the way.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that that happens as real estate agents, right? Likely we are more familiar with certain parts of our city than with other parts of our city. It's no question that you are more familiar with wells and septic because of where you live compared to me. I live in town in a townhouse.
Thanks for bringing up septic
You're
systems.
welcome. You're welcome. I felt that that
It
needed.
hit the fan again this weekend. You know that.
Yeah, yeah. So there are things that as realtors, when we are hired, that we bring to the table, right? And that is familiarity. One of your other specialties that isn't mine per se is your historic homes that you know so much about, and the things that you sit in on about downtown. And yes, we lived in older homes, and yes, I know some of that, but I feel like that is really something that
But don't you feel like you have clients too when you have someone who's buying? Think you, I guess, the folks who just moved from Ann Arbor.
yeah.
Was there something that in the house that they finally selected gave them a familiar feeling to?
Yes, and what was interesting, he just did a Google review for me, and I remember the first couple of houses financially and what they looked like. He was freaking out. He goes, "These are just white boxes. There's no character. There's no anything." And when we went to the one we went to, it was out of the distance that he thought he wanted to be away from the rest of the family. And we walked inside. It was the third house. It was the first day, and that's the one they bought, and they love it. And it was the color, it was the architecture outside, it was the diversity, it was the fact that they had a big lot in Michigan and now they had a corner lot and all those things. So right, if we're paying attention to our clients, hopefully our familiarity with neighborhoods and builders and developers and schools helps them find places.
Well, and I know in past episodes we talked about the fact that you mentioned in the previous episode that to drive from your house,
Mhm.
if you need to go to a grocery store, you've got a Trader Joe's, you've got a Fry's, you've got a Safeway, you've got a boom, boom,
Sprouts,
boom,
all
boom,
of
boom,
them.
boom.
Yeah.
But there are people who want to be close to what is familiar to them from a shopping standpoint.
Hmm.
It's like I need to be
Yeah.
within.
Yeah.
Pick whatever that is, but it is definitely one of those things. And I know in the way you wrote that, it was about all those old familiar places.
Yeah,
And I don't think I quoted Billy Joel in that, did I?
kind of, sort
Yeah.
of, but
He
I'm
was
very.
familiar faces, not familiar places.
I
I don't
don't know.
know.
I
You
don't know.
listen to Billy Joel more than I do.
Yeah, yeah. And
Someone in
so,
our house is not a big Billy Joel fan. Feels like everything sounds the same.
well, some of us love him, so there you go. Anyway, and you all, I'm going to end this discussion of this word and throw it to Eric for one of his words. Um, One of the things that happened recently, and if you're a Facebook friend of mine, you probably know this. The hairdresser that I went to for the last 15 years or so was tragically killed in a car accident 2 weeks before I was supposed to have an appointment with him. And this is what I wrote. As I add this note today, February 17th, 2024, I want to honor the memory of my hairdresser of 15 years, Jason Ashkenazi. Jason died tragically a couple of nights ago. When I heard the news yesterday, I sobbed. Jason was familiar. I still sob. His shop was a place of comfort. He knew all my stories like any good hairdresser and friend. He had coffee and he had sparkling water. He had a comfy couch for waiting. His art surrounded his clients on the walls of his shop. Jason was doing some of the artwork for this book, and I wasn't loving the first image of the word flush. But today I know I will use that photo and I will laugh and cry and remember my friend. Rest in peace, Jason. Familiarity. All right, Eric, cheer me up.
All right, cheer you up. All right, I'm gonna go do the fastidious.
Okay.
The and I know we said we're gonna pick out something. So this is Donna's writing. I'm reading her words. Someone told me I was fastidious. I looked at them with a raised eyebrow and thought, is that how you see me? Meanwhile, rolling around in my head is the thought that if that I have to look this word up because in my head and my heart, I would never use that word to describe myself. And you know what? I was right. This is not a good adjective for me. The Google Dictionary uses this sentence to describe someone. She chooses her words with fastidious care, meaning with great care and attention to detail. There are also comments about the attention to detail related to cleanliness, etc. As I type, I'm looking around my office at many things on the shelf and wondering when was the last time that it was all lifted and dusted. So are you a fastidious person?
Boy, I sure don't think so, Eric. When I was working on this word and started sending words to be edited, I had started this and it was 6 months later and I hadn't finished it, which to me was evidence that I was not very fastidious with this writing. Um, and and the artwork that Adam did for it is great. So I can't wait,
Oh, Adam did fastidious?
yeah, Adam did that artwork. It's really good. Um, but but I think I write in there that the people that when they come over for, or you go over to their house for dinner, every single thing is done before they go to bed, right? All the dishes are done, everything's put away, the tables are wiped, the chairs are put back. Not me, not me. And I'll bet for mom it would have been that way, right? Mom would have been cleaned up and everything was in its place.
Well, I think our older brother adopted that some.
Oh
Think
yeah.
of what we've done our family reunions. And at night, and if it isn't right, we know the dishwasher is getting reorganized in the morning
Dan will fix the
to
dishwasher.
be loaded the right way.
Except he's mad at us now. He doesn't. that is so true. And yet there are certain things that we as realtors, if we want to get paid, we have to be fastidious at some level, right? If you don't do the paperwork, check the boxes, get the people their keys or give their keys or do it, it doesn't happen.
Right.
It's just not my favorite place to be. My favorite place to be is painting art, like the picture behind me. Which
Well, and in some cases, you can be fastidious in certain aspects and certain portions of your life,
yeah,
and less in others. You
Yeah.
live alone.
Yes.
So if you wake up in the morning having chosen not to do dishes at night,
Yep.
got nobody to look to and go, "Hey, why'd you leave the sink up?"
Right.
It's
It's
a
my
choice.
fault. Yeah.
It's a choice.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but like you said, there are other things that there is a start, there is a finish, there is a set of steps that have to be done. This morning, before we recorded, I was following up. I've got a remote closing for both the buyer and the seller. I'm representing the buyer for a piece of property this coming Friday. I sent an email out last week asking for wiring instructions, and here's the closing location. Both myself and the seller's agent, neither one of us have heard anything, and both of us sent an email this morning going, "Hey, what's going on? None of us have heard anything." Turns out, electronic stuff. She thought she hit send and it didn't send, so it's sitting scrolling in an outbox. So nobody had the information. So if we were not checking the boxes in a fastidious manner to make sure, would we have been a couple of days further down the road? Since we both need remote closers
Right.
in a specific location, those have to be scheduled ahead of time. You
Yep.
know that there are people in our business who do 3, 4, 5 and time of day and when the things go through, since possession occurs at closing and funding. And if it's later in the day, you're less likely to get funding.
Right. Right.
So all of those things are really, really important to making sure the transaction is still being nurtured towards
Yeah.
closing.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed.
And we won't even mention my office. There's a reason that my office is blurred out.
Yeah, but so as I was thinking about that, because I had mentioned that I thought Eric was more fastidious than I, and maybe the word should be thorough. I'm way more of a wing it. He puts way more of the details into this and the research and all of that. If you haven't already learned that from listening to us, that's him. And then I go, okay, and I look a couple things up. Which Eric, I don't remember you like that as a kid. So and maybe there's
Okay. Uh-oh.
You're frozen.
Is it you? Is it me? You look like you froze up.
So did you.
I think we're still recording and I'm not seeing my sister move.
All right. Well, our voices are still working. So I don't know what to do. Should I pause the recording for a minute, Eric? Oh. So is it perfect that the camera quit during the word fastidious?
Timing is everything.
As if we planned that. Anyway,
All right, do your fancy French word.
Okay. So I use the word fenêtre in the book, and I'll just read the first part. I think when I started this book, I thought that I would only use English words. However, that hasn't happened. This morning, I've been a bit glazed over from not much sleep, and I've been gazing through the windows. Since the word window clearly starts with a W, I decided to use the word in French, fenêtre. It's a great word, and honestly, for the most part, even if you never spoke a word of French, you can likely sound it out and pronounce it almost correctly, which Eric did not do before we started recording, just so you know. You guys, I went on Facebook and I asked for pictures of windows, thinking I'd get 4 or 5. I got 106 photos from people. You put them online, you private messaged them to me, you texted them to me. They are pictures from airplane windows, from car windows, from with kids looking out, with parents looking in, with stained glass in Europe, and it was fascinating, which may or may not be one of my words. but windows are so much a part of our life. And from a real estate perspective, yet again, there are people who, if you don't have big windows with big views, they don't want to buy. That's it.
Why buy on a hillside if you don't have anything to look at?
Right.
Because your window's too small.
Exactly. And as we photograph them, depending on the value of the home and what the windows look like, they'll be taken at sunset so that you can see the lights reflecting, so that you can get that comfort and that warmth that comes with the view from a window. So there's a whole lot written about windows, even though the word is fenêtre. And I also related a little bit to our eyes being the windows to our soul. And that we live in a world where a lot of people are busy looking at phones, not looking at each other. And as a result, you're like, whoa, is this your window? You know? And I think that we've lost so much in our world. When I see three people at a restaurant all on their phones, not talking to each other, not looking at each other, it makes me sad, kind of, you know? So
Yeah, and you see that more and more all the time.
yeah, yep. So
But you said, is that their window? I know it's certainly a compact nowadays. Now that it has the camera screen, how many people will flip it around? And I've seen girls fixing their makeup, checking their hair, seeing how they look. Like, this is my mirror now.
we can do that with this.
It's a reflection of me.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
So
and as you mentioned, the windows with a view, windows used to be so much more. What is it? Fenêtre? Am I getting closer?
yeah, yeah.
Um, used to be much more of a statement of wealth than what you have in generic, I'll say, builder basic standards for many houses nowadays. It's some sort of polyvinyl window, it's double paned, it's white, it's one panel over one panel. And windows used to have a design and an aesthetic to where you had 6/3, but the 6/3 were 6 smaller rectangular panes that may hang over 3 vertical planes in order to create a look from the street. The transom windows and the transom windows that would have potentially leaded glass or stained glass that would open up and had that, it was much more than just, hey, that's a window that has a screen on it.
Well, especially in some of the lower end homes where you have to have a window in a bedroom for someone to be able to escape. And it's
right, which was never a fire code thing.
No, it wasn't about that.
In the past. So they've developed, they've changed, and you mentioned previous in this episode about the historical homes and the fact that windows are one of the biggest thing that becomes a discussion point on all of the design review commission meetings, because people will say, well, we're changing out these windows. It's like, well, it needs to be a wood window, and a wood window is not standard and it's more expensive, and it needs to conform and look like the historical pictures. And they'll bring pictures up from the 1940s to show, here's what we know the house looked like in 1940s. This is what the windows need to look like. Yeah. Think of the house and on the 1868 house
on Lynn,
and the big picture window that faced out Lynn Street. But there was the big window where the love seat was at, onto the front porch, and then there was the smaller window up above. It was a very distinctive style, which then allowed you to coordinate getting the iris stained glass that
which hangs in my house. And
now hangs in your house above your open concept kitchen.
Exactly. And the bay window there with the lacy curtains that Mom had, where we put the Christmas tree that you could see from the outside. You're right. It was a big architectural statement. And it is something I just saw. I have some clients coming from Park City, and I just looked at their listing online, and they have a mountain range behind them with acreage, with massive windows from the living room. Because if you're going to be there, that's what you want to see, right?
Right. That's what you want to see. And now that we have the capabilities, those glass windows become huge.
Yeah.
Special, custom, try to do, even as we're thinking, I mean, we're at a time at our house, we've been in for 22, going to be 23 years. Our original windows need to be replaced because they're vinyl. You can't,
they're wearing out,
change the glazing and everything else. They're drying, the seals are going. We know there's some air issues. I mean, none of them are getting that mildewy kind of look like you've seen windows that have that. But at the front of our house, where we have 4 standard 36-inch wide windows side by side,
Yeah.
We're talking about when we do it, the middle window, we'll put two smaller ones on either side and replace and change the framing and put one larger window between the two narrower ones.
Are you gonna make it so that you have screens there so that you can open those?
Yes.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. And I mean, we've had screens before, but the screens wear out too. It's
Yeah.
just
Well, everything does.
nothing is designed to last. And I have an email off to my septic maintenance company about that very thing that I'll say the owner hasn't responded to me yet. Not pleased about that.
Good times. Oh, yeah, yeah.
But
All right, Eric, what's the fourth?
finite.
You gotta finish.
Finite was one of your F words. Maybe this is the way you finish the book, right?
I don't know yet, but maybe.
No, finish, finite, whatever it's the and you open this one reflecting. You must have been doing this your last trip to Germany.
Okay.
It's 4:30 p.m. where I am, 7:30 a.m. at home in Arizona. I am somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean on the last leg of my wandering summer vacation. And as I was hauling my bags to the airport in Munich this morning, I was thinking about this most recent journey and the word finite. Everything we experience in the world is finite. Now, those two thoughts don't follow each other up specifically, but there's a time and a place. We relate this from a finite standpoint to our transactions.
Yeah.
If a transaction is going smoothly from start to finish, we know there is a specific end date.
Yep.
When we do a listing, we put a finite time or a frame around the time that that house is intended to be on the market.
Mhm.
And if we are doing our job successfully, you don't have to file an amendment
Yeah.
and say, hey, we have to extend our previously thought finite time.
Yeah.
It's what we do, how we work in some very, very specific timelines.
Yeah.
One of the things that I brought up to you is we're planning for this. I have a transaction that's going.
Eric, you're frozen again. Oh man. You're gonna have some editing to do, brother.